Okay, turn TV off. Or pause it.
Hello, Halo Nation. Big T coming at you with some tech tips for Wednesday night's Pulsar Halo TV episode. We do this every Wednesday night, going through the good stuff and even the bad stuff. The things that we need to figure out to know how to properly and most effectively set our systems up, run our systems, do different things with our systems, make them do the tips and tricks that we like to have as home automation in our home. So tonight we're going to be talking about a couple of things. If you haven't already seen it on the screen down below, let me go over here. We're going to be talking about the two most common things that come in every person's kit. Everybody's security kit obviously has to do with security sensors. And the two most common sensors are the door sensors and the motion sensor. And the door sensor is sometimes a challenge for people. So we are going to go through, I know it seems simple, but we're going to go through a couple of different ways of mounting these door sensors. Just in case you run into, we're going to look at the standard ways to mount the door sensors, and then we're going to run into the, what if I have this, or what if I have that, things in door sensors. We're going to try and recreate some of them, because just some people have challenges with them. So we're going to go through the door sensors first. If you don't know what a door sensor looks like, well, actually, I'm going to take you and show you directly what a door sensor looks like. So I'm going to hold on here. I'm going to mute this, and I'm going to go to the mobile Pulsar Halo TV cam. So hold on just a second. There, now you can hear me. Let me make sure I got this turned to the right spot. Okay. Here I am. You're going to come with me so I can show you some stuff. So hang on. So if you look at that sensor right there, one of the things, this is standard what everybody hopes their door sensor can do. Hopes when they put the sensors on, they can actually be mounted just like this. If everybody's door was like this, would be great. Ideally, you want the sensor on the door jamb and the magnet on the door. That's the ideal situation. And the reason for that is this door gets opened and closed and open and closed and open and closed and open and closed, and it gets slammed and all kinds of things. And if the sensor is on that door, now the sensor takes that beating. The other reasoning behind it, let's say the door happens to open the other way. Like in most businesses, the doors will open up to the outside. Well, now this sensor is outside, exposed to the elements. Maybe it's raining outside or something like that. And, it's not a good idea to have the sensor wet because it's not sealed. I mean, water can get inside there. So ideally on your door, this would be the most ideal situation. If everything lines up flush, you kind of look how that is just a little bit higher here than it is here, but it's still pretty close. And you see how close that is? It's right up to the edges. You got it right up to the cracks of the door, so you can get the closest possible contact on there. Now keep in mind a couple of points, is this flat side is the side that the sensor is on. What that sensor is looking for is this magnet. So this magnet can be mounted in any direction. And I'll show you another example of that. But this is kind of the ideal situation, being able to have the sensor on the door jamb and the magnet on the door so the sensor doesn't take the beating. So let me go show you a different situation where this might not work out. So hang on, come with me. Here we go. We're going for a little walk. So here's another option. Say, for instance, the sensor is not going to fit really well over here. You're going to try and put it on this side, but it won't fit. So then if you have to put the door sensor on the door, that is obviously a secondary option. And it's an option that's viable for a lot. But now you look at that little ridge there, this reason this door sensor, if I were to put this door sensor over on this side, it would, it's kind of sticking to this molding here. It's not really flat, so it doesn't have a good stickable mounting position. And then once you do get it over here, the magnet is going to be this far away from it at its closest point. So that might not be the most ideal situation. So then you have to settle for putting the sensor on the door
And look at this, you got this nice little lip right here. That magnet fits right down in that lip. So that lines up the door sensor pretty well. It's nice and close. Again, the flat side is where the sensor is, and it's looking for this magnet. So now let's say that, for instance, we were going to put this sensor at the top of the door. And I'm going to show you that on another one. But here's another thing with this door sensor. This door is metal. Now, I haven't had a problem with it, but there are, in some cases, where this metal door will interfere with the sensor. And that's what we talked about last week. In every kit will come one of these Metal Max door sensor mounts. And what this does is that sensor will snap off of here and it will snap right into this Metal Max mount. So now what that does is that takes your sensor and now it tips it out. So instead of laying flat on the door like it was, now it takes that sensor and I can mount it just like this. And what that's doing is that's tipping the sensor out towards, away from the door, so the antenna in this sensor doesn't interfere so much with the metal door. And so then you would mount that just like this, but it'll be tipped out a little bit just so it has better communication with the hub, because now that antenna is pulled away from that metal door. And if that pulls it up enough, and maybe this molding is a little too deep, it's too far down in to where it doesn't line up, well, that's where the other half of the Metal Max sensor isn't just for metal doors, but you can see if you put your sensor on top of that mount, here's what that mount looks like without the magnet. And now when you put the magnet on it, it raises it up to where you might need that in order to raise this magnet out of this hole just a little bit in order to help it line up with the sensor better. So that's what the magnet side of the Metal Max sensor is for, is just raising that magnet up just a little bit farther to give it better contact. So let's go look at another one. Maybe you've got a patio door and you don't know how to mount it to the patio door. Well, here's one option, and I'll show you a secondary option. But in your patio door, you got the patio door that kind of opens this way. Well, here's one option. Mount the sensor to the door and then put the magnet inside on this other molding. That way it pulls away, makes separation. You probably heard it beep. And then when you put it back together, now it's making contact with that magnet. The other option you have is to take this sensor, and it's kind of hard to see up in here, but there's the top of the door. Take the magnet and mount it right here, and then take the sensor just below the magnet. And that way, when the door opens, it slides the sensor away from the magnet and then can bring it back closer to it. So I should have done a better job of mounting that, but you can see you just have to leave that space in there. So you put the magnet up on that top molding first, because the magnet doesn't have to be any certain direction. You know, even though on the magnet, there's that little nipple that's kind of supposed to point at the nipple of the sensor, but you don't have to. That magnet can be mounted any direction up underneath there, up on the top of a door. I'll show you another example in here, for instance. Let's say we've got a door like this one here, to where that magnet is not going to really fit on the rounding of this molding, but it could fit right here. So you could take this magnet just like this. Give me a second. I know that's probably loud. That thing goes off. So here's an option for you here. So you got, let's say this is at the top. Obviously, this is the top of the door. And this little magnet isn't really going to mount very well to this because it's rounded. Well, take the sticker off the magnet. And instead of trying to mount it like this, just tip it and mount it. Put the sticker up towards the top and it'll mount perfectly right there. And then all you have to do is take your sensor, once that magnet's mounted, and just put the sensor like here. Make sure that that nipple side is facing the magnet. Then you slide that up there, and you can see I'm not going to stick it to it because it's my office door. But then, so basically what I'm getting at is this magnet, even though that little nipple there is supposed to be lining up with the sensor, it doesn't have to be. It's just a magnet. It's got magnetism all the way around the thing. So if it won't mount like that properly, use this flat surface up here and push it up and mount it up in here. Wish I had another hand, but give me a hand. Push. So this just like that. So what you'll end up doing is you'll mount the magnet up here first. You want to get that mounted first. That way you know. There, now let's just pretend that's stuck right there. And then you put the sensor right there. And so that's what it'll end up looking like. And now you've got the thing within a ½ inch of the magnet. And when the door opens up, it's going to separate from the magnet. So anyway, just a few tips on how you can make that work. So that's door sensors. Now, let me get back to my screen here.
Okay, now I'm back. Now you can hear me. So, door sensors 101. Now let's go and look at some motion sensors. People have had problems with motion sensors. So, this is what the motion sensor is going to look like in your box. It's actually going to be in this nice plastic, but I already took it out. So, you pull that out of the box. A couple of things to keep note of in your box. There are some instructions. Kind of shows you how mounting screw holes in case you want to mount it by screw. So I'm going to show you how to get to those screw holes. But ideally, in most cases, you shouldn't need it. But in your box will come 2 strips. And these 2 strips are what primarily, I will say, it's the initial holding of your sensor up on a wall. I wouldn't call this the only way to hold your sensor on the wall because you're going to probably want to have a secondary backup. This is just to kind of get it stuck and positioned where you want. So what you do with these, depending on if you're putting it in a corner, to where it's going to mount like this, if I can get that angle right, mount like that in a corner, or you're going to mount it flat on a wall. You're going to have those 2 options that you can do, put it in the corner and flat on the wall. If you're going to be putting it flat on the wall, you just take one side of this tape, doesn't matter either side, they're both sticky. You peel that off, and you put, one on this side in a nice position. I like to put it right along the edge here so it's making contact, because you can see there's these cutouts and everything. So it makes contact with more surface area, and then one over on this side so it makes contact with more surface area. And then once you get those 2 stuck, then you can peel these off, and you can turn it over and firmly press it to your wall. And they say hold it for 15 seconds. I push it and I just kind of wiggle it a little bit, making sure it's making contact. Now, if it's going in a corner, like we were going to put it in a corner like this, well, then obviously you want your strips along these edges, which is why they make them cut like that, to where you can take one of these strips and put it on this side, one of these strips and put it on this side, and now you can place this thing in a corner, because now it's going to stick to the corners of the wall. And that can be your primary solution. Push it, just give it a little bit of wiggle while you're holding pressure on it, and now it's connected to your wall. Now, a backup solution in order to make sure this thing has good contact is to get yourself a tube of silicone, and now you can just put a strip of silicone down this side, strip of silicone down this side, just for extra support, just to make sure that thing holds firmly. Now, here's an alternative option. If you want to actually mount this thing very securely, there's these holes right here that you can mount a screw through. Now, how do you get to that? That's going to be rather difficult without wrecking anything. I'm going to show you. Again, this is a little bit more in-depth, but there's a little button. Oh, and just so you know, this is the bottom of the sensor, and this is the top. I've seen several times where people mount these things upside down. Here's the thing to remember. This is the lens. It's shooting down to the floor and straight out. If you turn it like this, then it's shooting up to the ceiling. So you want to have this mounted, between 6 and 7 feet, and then the angle that it's transmitting is kind of down like this. So it's going to be transmitting out and down. So that's the proper direction to mount your sensor. That's the top, and this is the bottom. If you need to really make sure, on the bottom is the little clip to open this sensor. So we're going to open this up. Just give it a little push on there, and then this thing will crack open. If you've ordered yours as an accessory to your system, it will probably have this battery tab in it. It may or may not have it if you've ordered it. Actually, it'll have it in every one of them, I believe. The battery tab will be in it, or the battery will be out of it. So anyway, that's how you get to pull the battery tab, is by going in there. Now, how do we get to these holes back here? Very simple process. There's a little clip on this side here. And what happens, and I'll show you, you push that clip, move that clip away to release that board. And see, that's what that clip does, is that's what holds that board into position. So you can kind of just lift the board up just slightly. And then there's these two notches over here that the board sits in. So there's the circuit board that's in there, and there's the two notches that it sits in. So when you go to put it back in, you got to put it under those notches and then snap it down into place. So but anyway, the reason why we're pulling this thing out, again, just grab a hold, preferably up the top of the battery here. Push this clip out of the way just a little bit. Don't break it off. And that will pull the board, so you can carefully set this aside so it doesn't get damaged, because that lens in there is very delicate. And now you've got access to those screw holes. Now what I do, because I've always got my handy dandy Leatherman with me, you can probably get a drill if you're not very handy with it, is I will just take and I will put a hole right where that thing is. This is just my tip. So I put a hole, I just kind of drill a hole in there, and then I'll maybe go to the other side, and I'll finish reaming out that hole just with a knife. I mean, you can use a knife, or you can use a nice drill bit, whatever. And I blow out all the shavings that come out of it. And see, now I've got a hole in there. And the screws that come in your system, or come in your motion sensor, typically I'll just take one of those screws and I will hold that thing up there, because I will put the tape on the back, but then I will also use this screw, and I will put that in there. And now you've got that screw that can now screw into a wall. Now, if you're just screwing right into sheetrock, you can use just this screw. Just don't over tighten it so it doesn't strip it out. If you end up already have stripped it out, ideally you can put these little anchors. The screw strips out. Darn it, I screwed it too hard. Well, a little tip you can do is, once that screw has stripped the hole out, well, now you can tap this thing in just with a small hammer or even the butt of a screwdriver. Maybe if the hole's not quite big enough. So take your screwdriver and ream that hole out a little bit. Now this thing will fit in the hole that's in that sheetrock. So you just take it and you tap it in with the butt of your screwdriver. And now you've got a nice secure connection to screw that screw into this anchor. And that's what this anchor's for. And so now that screw will fit in there nice and tight. And because it's already in your wall, the pressure and the friction of that thing, and so now you can screw this thing into the wall, but it's going into that anchor. So now you've got that. And typically, for most purposes, if I know I'm going to be putting a screw in it, obviously I do all this before I put the tape on and before I peel the tape. I usually know I'm going to use a screw beforehand, especially if it's in a dirty environment, or maybe you're in somebody's garage where they don't have they don't have sheetrock. All they have is wood studs. Well, this is your perfect solution. You can use this screw to screw it into a wood stud, and now your motion sensor is securely mounted to that stud. If you want to use both screws, you're more than welcome to. I just typically find one screw is good enough. Now, with one screw, it's going to have a tendency to be able to do this. So if somebody comes up and hits it, the motion sensor might get tipped. That's where the second screw would stop that from happening. But that's your choice as to what you want to do with that. Now, obviously, if you're using the screw to hold that motion sensor in there, you don't really need the silicone in there because that screw will have a nice firm hold on it. So once you get that screw in and it's screwed into the wall, now it's up on the wall already. Now that the screw is in there, carefully take this board, and like I said before, there's those two little notches right there. This board fits right into those notches. And it's hard to do this on a camera. Well, I gotta do it without looking at the camera. There you go. So now it's fit into those two little notches that are right there. And so this thing can pivot, and you'll see there's a little hole in the board where that thing goes. So now, get it into place, make sure it's in the proper place, and then right over here where that little clip is, now you just push down. And now that motion sensor is back where it's supposed to be, with a screw in the back coming out into the wall. And then to put the cover back on, you start with the top, because the top has got that little notch right here in the top. That fits right into that little hole in the top of the sensor, so you just take it. Obviously this battery tab would be gone already. And so you just hook it on the top first, and now you can push that clip in on the bottom. And now you're set and ready to go. So anyway, just a couple of tips for you to get more secure mounting. Like I said, if you're not going to use the screw, highly recommended to use silicone both on this and around your door sensors. Take a little tube of silicone. You can get them at your hardware store. It's just straight silicone. And then just take it and just put a small bead, around whatever sides you have access to. You might not have access to this side. It might be too tight in here, wherever. But just put a little bead wherever you got. And if you're not afraid of a little silicone, then you can smear it with your finger, to get it down in the crack there. Just give it a little smear. Doesn't need to be a whole bunch, just enough to make contact with the sensor and with the door or the door sill. And it will just give just enough extra support to make sure that this thing doesn't fall off. So those are some good tips for mounting sensors and making sure they're secure where you mount them. So anyway, that's all I got for tonight. I just wanted to run all that past y'all. It'll help your customers if they have questions about it. Now you can give them some tips on how to mount that, and that way they don't have problems. And obviously a happy customer is a long-term customer, and a long-term customer is good for all of us. So anyway, that is all I've got for tonight. I want to give a shout out to a few people here. Daphne's on here, Brian Singletary, Nolan Hefton, Dean Johnson's on here. Let's see who's on the other side. Daryl Stewart. Hey Daryl, hope that camera worked out. Give me a call after this if it hadn't, or if you're still working on it, give me a call. Victor's on here. So anyway, that's what I got for tonight, guys. Hope it was helpful for you. Again, if you have any other questions about things, don't hesitate to send me an email. Send an email to pulsarhalotv@gmail.com, and we will cover tips and tricks that work best for you. So that's it. Have a fantastic evening, guys. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.